Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Patreon exclusive podcast. This one, what's this one called now? My favorite match ever?
Yeah, my favorite match.
My favorite match. My favorite match. This is obviously another one of your brainchilds in which you pitched. So I'll let you lay out the background for it.
So the background for this podcast is that, you're going to speak to members of the AIW roster, and they're going to explain, or they're going to lay out their favorite match they've had for AIW, and then you're going to kind of give some background into it as to, why was this match made, if you can remember, and then kind of what you thought of the match, that person's feelings going into the match, how they felt about the match, and, why is that their favorite match?
Okay, everyone got all that? I think our first guest is going to be none other than you, Dominic Garrini.
Oh, wow, put me on the spot.
Because you're here, and this was your idea. So, what is your favorite match?
It's hard because two kind of always come to mind, and then they kind of tie for me. So I'm going to break the rules on the first episode and go with two.
You're going with two. We're double episode.
Double episode.
Sweeps week. Big double episode.
So the first match would be myself versus Zack Sabre Jr. from Hell on Earth. What's the number on that one? I'm bad on the numbers.
I think it was 11, maybe.
Yeah, Hell on Earth 11.
You should know what's your favorite friggin' match.
I just know Hell on Earth. I don't remember the exact numbers, brother. So there's that match. I remember.
Well, what's the second one? Then we'll get into it.
Me versus Tom Lawler, the very first match we had at Cool as Ice.
Okay. So the first match, let's go back and break it down, and how does it all come about? Because you'll probably have to refresh my memory on a lot of this stuff. Because, like I've said a lot of the times in the past, it's like I feel like my brain purges some memories. And sometimes it needs. I need a little bit to get going. I wish I had one of those just like perfect memories, like a Bruce Pritchard who can remember every stupid little detail about something that happened 27 years ago. I cannot. But if you get my once we start talking about it, some things I'm sure will come to me.
So I remember the exact idea behind this match, and when you first told me you were even considering it, because I remember we had Zach in twice in 2016. Business would have been in 2016. This match happened. We had him in for Gauntlet for the Gold when he wrestled Ethan Page for the belt, and then the second time we had him in for Absolution, and he wrestled Louis Linden.
Yes,
I remember that Zach told you he enjoyed wrestling Louis Linden because everybody that brought Zach in at that time would usually bring him in to wrestle a superstar, and it was matches that he had always had. Or matches.
So, yeah, okay. So now that did jog my memory a little bit. So in talking to Zach, he said, specifically after, I guess after both matches, because Ethan Page wasn't really a superstar at that point. But specifically Louis Linden, who Louis Linden is, as I always say, is one of, I feel, probably the most underappreciated guy on the indies. He's a guy that Zack Sabre Jr. certainly never heard of. He's not doing all these big shows and just hitting the circuit. Like Louis Linden wrestles like AIW and maybe another show here and there at this point. So he was a guy that Zack Sabre Jr. didn't know too much about, and I knew the match would be good because I know what Lewis's skill set is, but Zack certainly didn't, and they ended up having a really, really, really good match. And I remember speaking to him, and he said, I would love to come in and work with more guys like this who I don't know. Because I feel, and this is like, I feel like this is obviously is this pre Zack Sabre Jr. and Cruiserweight Classic or
no,
or like right around the time?
This is right around the time he would have wrestled Lewis probably after they'd filmed the first two rounds.
Okay,
so this is pre him getting to the finals.
So what he said was, he he really wanted to do some things to test himself because he had, been wrestling at this elite level for quite some time, and in the UK and worldwide, basically, and he wanted to be put in positions to where, like, he knew it's easy for himself to be good against another person that's good, or another person that is, at an elite talent level. He said, that took basically virtually no skill at all. And he said, getting in there with guys he didn't know, like a Lewis Linden, or a guy that doesn't wrestle like him at all, like a Ethan Page, he said he really enjoyed doing that because it brought it brought a challenge to him, and I guess wrestling had not been so challenging, I guess, to an extent, based on, he was working with top tier talent everywhere he went, because he is a top tier talent. So, that kind of got me thinking, and, the next time, I think that's the last time we were ever able to bring him in, if I'm not mistaken. But it got me thinking, like, let's throw somebody to the wolves, and in turn kind of give Zack Sabre Jr. Something that is going to, he's like one of those he's like an artist, he needs to be inspired by something, and so that's kind of what my thought process was let's give him something that he could really really test himself to do.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to the idea of kind of your idea with building the students as well, because one of the big things with the students, and that you've always done for all of us, is you've always given us all some kind of big major opportunity. You look at, like, Carson got to wrestle Johnny, Flynn got to wrestle Kingston, and then BJ.
Yeah, Flynn got a couple.
I'm trying to think of other guys that got, like, a lot of the guys got great opportunities. Singh and Alex had all kinds of crazy good opportunities. I mean, so it's kind of the pattern that you take is you give us a chance, and it's, as you've always said to me, I give you guys enough rope to hang yourselves with, and it's do you hang yourself, or do your feet touch the ground, and do you take the rope off your neck and keep running?
And another thing is nobody is going to get better working with students or locals, or I'm sure everyone sees it that attends, like, every city has that, like, local type of independent wrestling where it's just like a school, and the guys from the school wrestle the other guys from the school, and that's it, pretty much. And then the other people there are other guys that were at the school before. So it's like it's a certain level of talent, and that's not to say that there's no talent, but it's like you don't learn the tricks from those guys that you've already been learning with. You learn new tricks when you get in there with a new magician, so to speak. So it's like I always felt that, okay, once I see somebody that is has not hung themselves as of yet, it's like, okay, now let's throw them in there, because I know that they're competent enough to potentially take this learning experience. So that's why I try to do it. And we've seen it more recently with like Eddie Kingston wrestling Wes Barkley, or Eddie Kingston doing things with Zach Thomas recently. So it's kind of one of those things to where it's like or like even like I forgot about this. Like the Weird World wrestled Little Guido before. The Weird World wrestled Kurt Hawkins and Hornswoggle. Everyone has kind of mixed it up a little bit. You know what I mean? Or like Dr. Dan gets the spots with the legends and stuff like that. He wrestles Scott Steiner. He gets Double J beats him up. Shit like that. He wrestles Shark Boy. So it's always kind of like let's throw people in there with veterans, so then they can learn and in turn elevate their themselves as performers, and then hopefully get out more on the road and then bring those new tricks back to the school and so on and so forth, and kind of keep the evolution of all the talent moving forward.
Yeah, and that's key for us, you know. And it also raises our stock in the fans' eyes because, you know, if you can wrestle someone and be seen on, you know, this higher guy's level, then, you know, you're more than a student at that point.
Right, and that's that's another thing that's, you know, that goes into this philosophy of booking the students is like trying to get the the stink of being a student off of the students and make people, you know, just evolve into just wrestlers on the show as opposed to, oh, those are just this is just the student match.
Yeah. I remember when you told me about this match because I think you had told me that you had booked Zach for the card, and it was just like I was hoping that I would get on. And I remember we were at the Ice House. I think we were watching an Indians playoff game. It was, I think, because that was the year they went to the World Series.
Okay.
And I remember you're going down the card.
Well, this makes sense because if you're saying it was at a Hell on Earth, then this is probably, you know, in October where Zach gets booked.
Yep. And you're going through the card and, you know, like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. And then you're like, oh, and you're going to wrestle Zack Sabre Jr. And I was like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah, you're like, you know, this is your chance. You know, it's your chance to kind of make or break. And I remember because everybody kind of had a chance, like, because we had Double Dare a couple weeks before Hell on Earth. So everything was kind of like real tight. And I remember like Dan and Carson got the chance to wrestle Crime Time and everybody was booked on Double Dare except for me. And I remember fans coming up to me because the match hadn't been announced yet. And they're like, oh, are you sad you're not wrestling this weekend? And I was like, nah, I'm good. I was like, I'll gladly take my hand to help run their shows and, you know, clean up messes and whatever needs done this weekend.
And that's another thing is like, you know, that becomes the hard part for me because it's like at a certain point you can't book everybody on every single show. And then you have to deal with like, it's like a weird thing to where it's like, you're not my favorite child anymore. So, you know, like that's the vibe that a student coming out of the AIW school that does not get booked, that's kind of like that's kind of like the vibe they send my way. So it's a very uncomfortable thing for me at times to where I can't book every student. So it's like that's another reason to why it's like where I will try to give everybody at least one gift. Maybe that's the only one that they get, but you know, one gift to, you know, wrestle somebody decent on an AIW show because it's like it gets uncomfortable for me when, you know, I'm sitting there and, you know, you have like you know, when I was at Mount Carmel, you have like that whole bleachers behind the concession stand that's full of students that aren't booked, and they're all kind of just like looking at you like
yeah,
we're here and we're like pretty bummed out about it, but we're not going to say anything, but we're going to look sad while we're here. So that's another thing that goes into the like, okay, let's try to give everybody at least one gift, and this turns into your gift. Yes,
and honestly, that gift obviously meant a lot to me, and it was, you know, it comes down to being my favorite match because it was one of those things that it was just a perfect storm and it worked exactly right. Zach was so willing to, you know, work with me and do the things that I wanted to do to help me get over and, you know, still keep him over.
Would you say he was one of your influences?
Oh, absolutely. So Zach, when he came to wrestle Ethan, did a seminar for us, and that was when you announced it. Like I was ready to go, and we did it. And I will always remember a lesson that Zach taught me from that seminar, and it was about setting goals. And he taught me to set goals differently than the goals that like most normal people would set. Because most normal people, their first goal in the game wrestling is I want to get signed. I want to be on WrestleMania. I want to do this. But Zach taught, at least he taught everybody this at the seminar. And it just matters on how you take it. Is you have to set like benchmark goals to get to your big goals. So he essentially, after that day, I had a set of benchmark goals to get to. So that's in March of 2016. None of the big shows have happened in 2016. So at that point, my first set of benchmark goals for the year is wrestle on J-Lit, Absolution, and Hell on Earth. And Gauntlet, I'm sorry. So wrestle on the 4 big shows, which I was already wrestling on Gauntlet, so because we had the scramble that day.
Right.
And, you know, by hook and by crook, I got on all the shows, you know, and at J-Lit, I wrestled Tracy. And at Hell on Earth, I wrestled Zach. So, and then I got on Absolution as well, just out of pure luck. So all those benchmark goals are marked off.
What'd you do at Absolution?
Me and Tracy versus To Infinity and Beyond.
Oh,
that was when Dukes got turned down at the border again.
Yep.
And then the other set of benchmark goals I made for that year was I made a list of opponents that I wanted to wrestle with in my first 2 years of wrestling. And this was back in March of 2016. So number one on the list was Zach, just naturally because of A, the idea behind the goals, B, the style, and just everything that he was doing. And like, I liked everything that Zach did because I knew that he trained jiu-jitsu, and I knew that he was helping, you know, bring jiu-jitsu kind of to the masses, which is one of like my overarching things that I think of in my wrestling is I want to, you know, show jiu-jitsu off to the masses and, you know, kind of get more exposure to the art. So it was like Zach, it was like Tracy, Guido was on there, He Who Shall Not Be Named in AIW Lure was on there, and just essentially the who's who of the grapple guys was on my list, but Zach was number one.
Okay. And that's, you know, like you said, it just became a perfect storm of this situation presenting itself because Zach had just been, he was living in America at the time, so he was a lot more accessible, and it was just like, all right, you know, let's do it. What's, you know, how does the, you know, the planning of the match go, the execution of the match, you know, and then, you know, the after effects of the match go?
I'll start with a kind of like, I'll add one in there. The pressure of this match was a lot for me because so Gargano's gone at this point.
Right. So that's another thing. I thought you have to be feeling immense pressure at this point.
Gargano's gone at this point. So whenever I had a big match before, I'd have Johnny or Candace to kind of talk me down, you know, get my head back straight. Like before this, probably my biggest match would have been Tracy at J-Lit. And I remember Johnny and Candace were there, and like they both calmed me down a bunch because I'm freaking out because, you know, 20 minutes before doors open, I'm in the tournament and I'm wrestling Tracy, and it's wild. So Johnny and Candace are gone. You know, they're in Orlando. So there's that. Then it doesn't help because as opposed to just being a smart person and not looking at my phone all day, I have all these tweets coming at me, and one I will always remember because it sticks with me, was someone tweeted, "Tonight is a make or break for Dominic Garrini's career. Either he does amazing or it's downhill from here." And I was like, okay. So there's all this and that. And then, of course, you know, on top of that, there's all the ring crew duties that we do. So I want to make sure, you know, we're in there, we're on time, we're ready to go. I would say I was finally able to calm down once we started planning the match because I had, you know, been such a fan of Zach. So I kind of knew all of his signature stuff. So I had developed a lot of ideas, and I was hoping that, you know, he would be okay with, you know, rolling with the ideas that I had and kind of going with it.
And he was receptive.
Oh, super receptive. We just changed a couple of things around, but like I had all kinds of setups from like, you know, the things he does special, and I even had an alteration for the finish to what he did, like to like a finish he did that I watched him wrestle Cedric. Because usually he does this running European uppercut, and everybody catches him in a backslide. Well, I thought, like, what if I catch you in a choke? You roll out, and then you do the big special pin you do, and that's kind of the finish. And he liked that a lot, and we rolled with all of that. And he was really excited to just, like, we did, I think, probably 6 to 7 minutes of just, like, grappling at the beginning. And, like, I was super into that. And he was, like, that was, like, the big thing he wanted to do. He was like, let's get these 6 or 7 minutes of grappling in. He's like, and let's just get to it.
Who won? I don't even remember. Did he win?
He did, and I remember this because I think deep down you wanted me to win to build for me and Whitmer, but you also said that it didn't make any sense to have me beat Zack Sabre Jr., and you didn't want to ask him to lose, which I had no problem because this was one of the situations where as long as I knew in my head, as long as I had a strong showing, win, loss, it didn't matter.
Yeah, I think I think going into it, my planning was like one of those like, you're going to lose, but you're really going to win in the end if it goes well, because nobody's going to remember that Zack Sabre Jr. beat you. It was more if you could hang with Zack Sabre Jr., that was the real win. And I also thought, you know, nobody was really going to buy you pinning Zack Sabre Jr.
Nope.
At that point.
Even Flash submitting him wouldn't have necessarily worked either. So aftermath, we do the match. It comes off great. Zach, and I think you asked him to cut the promo or he just did it on his own. I don't remember.
I think he just did it on his own.
He did it on his own, and I remember the one line that sticks with me is, did anybody tell you that, you have to wrestle for 10 years before you get this good? And, he put me over, and it was great, and, it was a lot of validation. Because for me, at that point especially, I had just gone from 7 years of competitive jiu-jitsu experience where I was very successful, and I quit all of that to start on something brand new. And my old coach told me the day I told him I'm done competing and I'm going to do professional wrestling that I was a fucking idiot. And that it was the dumbest idea I ever had. And him telling me that night was validation that at least my journey was, kind of in the right direction.
Is it just because, he cuts that impromptu promo or are you feeling like you definitely didn't sink at that point?
A little bit of both. The promo made me feel good, and I knew that I hung to the point I needed to hang to. Of course, I could have always done better, but I hung to the point I needed to hang to, and especially to the point where I won Zach's respect that night. So that was key, and then he cuts the promo, and then we do the aftermath with the Duke attacking me to continue what we were doing with me and BJ at the time. One thing that I always remember about this too is that I always know that I had a very good influence on Zach because I wrestled Martin Stone, who's in NXT now. About November. About 4 months later, I wrestled Martin Stone.
It was at a WrestleMania weekend, right?
It was WrestleMania weekend. It was at this shitty storage garage, and it was at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. And I remember talking to Martin before the match. We're calling the match, and he goes just bluntly to me. He goes, "To be honest with you, I was not looking forward to this match." He goes, "All I know is that I'm wrestling some MMA guy." He goes, "And I almost thought about canceling." He goes, "But I was at Rev Pro this afternoon." He goes, "And I was talking to Zach." And he goes, "Who are you wrestling tonight, Martin?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm this MMA guy, Dominic." And he's like, "Oh, Dominic Garrini." He's like, "He's very good." He's like, "You and him will be very good." Zach put me over to him, and he goes, "The moment Zach gave you your seal of approval, he goes, you won me over." He's like, and I was excited for it.
Well, see, and that goes to show, another purpose of this is a lot of this business is more of who you know than being good and who's going to put you over at the right time rather than being the most talented in the world. So that's another thing. It's if you guys can hang with these people and you're in the right place at the right time, it could lead to a lot more opportunities in the future. And that just kind of goes to show that's that does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little more aftermath on that match, just that match kind of, to be honest with you, kind of made me as a wrestler. People knew who I was at that point. They knew my style. They knew what I could do and what, I was capable of. So coming out of that match, it was just kind of onwards and upwards. And it was don't take a step back at this point.
And another thing that I do is, I guess a little bit more inside baseball here for Patreon is I will take these matches and I will upload them as a private link to YouTube, so you guys have something of great quality to send out to other promoters to try to get bookings and say, it's not just hey, watch me versus Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham. It's hey, watch me versus Zack Sabre Jr. Here's the full match.
Yeah, I can tell you that is a match I still send out to every promoter when I'm trying to get booked.
There's, it just kind of gives. It just kind of gives some credibility to some of the AIW students and a perception. And I still think that, in wrestling, 99% of the time, perception is reality. And if you can give off the perception that you can hang with a Zack Sabre Jr., even half the promoters probably don't even click the link. They probably just go, "Oh, wow, someone booked him against Zack Sabre Jr.? He must be okay." And same thing for a lot of guys. And, that's another thing that kind of is the benefit of coming to the AIW school is, getting a chance like this and getting a nice footage shot by SmartMark Video. And I upload it for you guys to send around to other promoters. And that's just an example of, not that, so to speak, but an example of, reputation and knowing the right people and who who's going to put you over can lead to something.
Absolutely.
And with that, I know you wanted to make this a double episode, but guess what? We're already out of time.
Okay.
We've already gone nearly 30 minutes.
Wow. Hey, we'll take it
on just Zack Sabre Jr. So I don't want these to be super long. These Patreon podcasts. I don't want
Plus, no one wants to hear more than 30 minutes of me. So.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of a good point to wind it down. But I guess everyone will now know that in the future you'll be back to discuss your match with Tom Lawler from Cool as Ice. But I guess just if you want to break down some final thoughts on this Zack Sabre Jr. experience and the after effects and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, this is a match that I've always kind of thought made my career and kind of made me into who I am. Honestly, this match gave me a stylistic setting of how to do matches that are grappling heavy. Like, I honestly have an entire game plan and blueprint in my head of what I call a grapple sprint, which is kind of what Zach and I did. About a 14-minute match, but where 6 to 7 minutes of it is grappling, and then the other 7 minutes is more traditional professional wrestling. So I take that away from it, and that's been immensely helpful to me. Just the perception. The biggest thing was, and as you just talked about, I wrestle Zack Sabre Jr. Zack Sabre Jr. cuts a promo talking about me being good. The perception of me now is that I'm not just some random rookie. This kid's someone to watch out for. So the after effect of this match was just kind of people believing in me and giving me opportunities and just kind of onward and upward from there.
So here's something that I just thought of. So how does this match play into Evolve and that whole thing? Because I would suspect that it has some sort of influence on Gabe or whatever.
So I don't know if Gabe's ever watched this match. I know I sent it to Gabe multiple times, and I know he knows it happened, and I know that Zach has put me over to him before. I think Tracy probably put him over to me more than Zach did off of this match. And honestly, when it comes down to it, my Evolve run, I have it all to blame. I have it all to thank for Tracy Williams, because from what I was told originally, I was only supposed to be a manager / bodyguard, but Tracy and Stokely pushed for me to be a wrestler because they knew my skill set. So that helped me out. But in general, being able to go to Gabe and say, hey, I wrestled Zach, and Zach will give me a very good reference. It's huge.
It's like somebody vouching for you.
Because I had him and I had Tracy, and when I did my first Evolve tryout, Gulak loved me. So Gulak stayed in touch with me and would check on me and stuff. So he knew I wrestled Zach. So a lot of people, were putting in his ear, hey, Dom's a guy to watch. Dom's good for the product. You should bring Dom in. So I know that helped me out a lot with that.
Well, I guess it wasn't the Zack Sabre Jr. match like I suspected, but
I mean, if he comes down and watches that, probably.
So I guess this is another one of those pilot episodes. An exclusive podcast for our Patreon subscribers. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess we'll wind it down. I never have to do the winding down of a podcast. So,
yeah, you don't.
It's a little bit.
This is the first time you're the moderator of sorts.
I should. No, well, never mind. Anyway, I guess until next time. I'm John Thorne.
I'm Dominic Garrini,
and this was my favorite match ever.